our best on this panel to be very interactive. So I would ask of my fellow participants that we keep our answers short, and then we work to build dialogue. So among other things, if you want to ask a question of your other fellow panelists, feel free, raise your hand, I'll acknowledge you, and then we can go from there. My name is Elizabeth Vish. I am the Senior Advisor for International Cyber Engagement at the Institute for Security and Technology. We're a member of civil society. It's a great pleasure for me to be a member of civil society after years in government. So we're a think tank that's based in Silicon Valley and really try to tackle the hard problems in technology. And this panel is an excellent example, I think, of a hard problem that can be tackled if we work together. So our goal here in this panel this morning is to discuss sort of effective coordination of cyber capacity building efforts so that we can talk about how we can leave no country behind, we can avoid duplication, we can seek to be as efficient as possible with our resources, but most importantly, that we can be responsive to the needs of countries that are receiving cyber assistance. So we have an excellent panel here. I think what I might ask that we would do is we can start. Our initial panelist is unfortunately unable to be with us in person. It's Miss Valeria Yonin. She is the Deputy Minister at the Ministry of Digital Transformation in Ukraine. And so I think we're going to go ahead and start with her video message, where she'll be talking a little bit about how the international community can work together better to avoid geographical investment gaps and asymmetries in strengthening cyber resilience globally, and how developing countries can assure that their needs, agency, and priorities are at the center of cyber resilience and digital development initiatives. So we'll get started hearing her video message to us, and then we will turn to our live panel after that.
I'm happy to welcome everyone at the Global Conference on Cyber Capacity Building. It's a great honor and a privilege for me to become one of the speakers today, and apologies for not attending in person. I believe that international community should work together to avoid geographical investment gaps and asymmetries by promoting regular collaboration and information sharing. It includes sharing best practices, identifying and addressing vulnerabilities, and developing common standards and frameworks. Developing countries often lack the resources to invest in cyber resilience. The international community can help to address this gap by increasing educational initiatives for professionals, build and strengthen capacity in order to be able to respond to cyber threats. I believe that establishing mutual cyber excellence centers and continuous cyber dialogues might be a good option. A huge part of cyber resilience is digital resilience. The Ukrainian government has digitized many public services, including paying taxes, fines, social financial assistance, and others. Ukraine has recently been called a European digital transformation tiger. Ukraine is also the first country in the world where digital passports are totally equivalent to paper or plastic ones. And we have also created DIA, an ecosystem of digital products, where DIA State Super App is a core product with 20 million users, 14 digital documents, 30 services, and digital signature. DIA helped us to be very resilient during full-scale Russian invasion to Ukraine. We have been able to react fast on the challenges that we've seen. For example, when Russian missiles started to hit the residential area, people went to the shelters, and we understood that they have no access to news, and that's why and how we embedded TV and radio into the app. Another example, a lot of people had to relocate during the full-scale Russian invasion to Ukraine, and we have created a service, a possibility to receive an IDP status in the app just in a few clicks, and also to receive social financial assistance. We have created e-enemy, a chatbot with authorization through DIA, which gave an opportunity for citizens to inform our armed forces about Russian troops and Russian equipment, and we have created a lot of other services. With DIA, we have been able to react fast and create new services from 3 days to just a few weeks. In case of if physical infrastructure is damaged, Ukrainians can access essential government services online, either in the app or on the DIA State portal of public services. Ukrainians can continue to study online and to grow business online with the support of DIA Business or DIA City projects.
So Ambassador Greenberger, would you like, I know you have been...
Countries should engage with the international community to share their experiences and best practices. This will help to ensure that their needs and priorities are taken into account in international initiatives. Also, partnerships with the private sector and civil society play a valuable role in building cyber resilience. Ukraine has faced the challenge of adapting to the rapidly changing cyber threat landscape. Ever since the start of the Russian full-scale invasion to Ukraine, we have been attacked by Russian hackers constantly. We do everything to support the sustainable functioning of the national information infrastructure, especially critical information infrastructure. This landscape is constantly evolving, and Ukraine must be able to keep up with the latest threats and vulnerabilities. However, we have made significant progress in improving our digital and cyber resilience. Ukraine has a strong national cybersecurity strategy which was put into effect in May 2021 to define the priorities of national interests in the field of cybersecurity, as well as goals and objectives in building national cybersecurity system for the long term. We continue to develop a strategy based on defense tech, cyber resilience, and interaction. Moreover, the number of qualified cybersecurity professionals in Ukraine is growing. Ukraine is actively developing strategic relations in the field of cybersecurity with key foreign partners, especially with the European Union, the United States of America, and other NATO member states and international organizations. And we are very grateful for the support and powerful cooperation for all of them. We are ready to share our experience and change the future for the better, making it resilient and secure for us all. Thank you for your attention.
I think that was an excellent introduction to this panel, hearing about both the things that we're trying to protect, the digital services, the digital access that we're trying to protect, and the steps to get there. Ambassador Greenberger, would you like to respond a bit? And I know you've been one of the great supporters of Ukraine over the past years. Welcome your thoughts.
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. And I would like also to refer to this video because it shows a little bit where we come from historically in cyber capacity building programs financed by government, because we come from security policy. So initially, cyber capacity building, also for the German government, was a tool in the toolbox of security policy, and it was meant to protect our collective security. But, Valeria also showed in her video, or illustrated in her video, that actually when a society digitizes and public administration moves into digitization, actually everything becomes a digital attack surface in times of conflicts, but also something that has to be managed and protected at actually any time. So you have to have cybersecurity professionals in both public sector and private sector. You have to have a cyber literate citizens so that they are able to deal with this environment. And so also in the German decision-making process, we moved from something that is purely security policy oriented towards something that is much closer to development policy, and from something that is emergency support, like we do it for Ukraine, to something that is more long-term, more stability-oriented, and also more similar to the two-way street that is also described in the United Nations language on cyber norms, where cyber capacity building is described as a two-way street. So cyber capacity building now is, I think, at the brink of being part of our globalization awareness and globalization policies. And that changing character or additional feature of cyber capacity building is something that I'm very grateful that we're addressing this at this conference.
Excellent, thanks so much. I would like to turn now to Her Excellency Ms. Slavica Gurkovska, the Deputy Prime Minister of North Macedonia, to speak a little bit about the North Macedonian experience. And specifically, your country has had cybersecurity capacity building needs. Can you tell us a little bit about when your government sought that capacity building, how did you go about finding ways to get what you needed supported by the global community? And specifically, do you have any advice to governments that are seeking capacity building for how they can express those needs in a way that they can be met in respecting the agency and the desires of the government that's seeking assistance.
Is it okay? Okay. Thank you for the question, and thank you. Thank to the German Federal Foreign Ministry for organizing this panel, because the topic is actually linked with the central pledge of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The Sustainable Development Goals leave no country behind. Because the global commitment and effort to reduce the inequalities and vulnerabilities that humanity is facing with, and which undermine the potential for growth or individual and collective level, must also include issues on cybersecurity. I am on this position less than 2 years, but nevertheless, we have been aware that we have a limited time, but actually that motivated us to do as much as possible to use the opportunity to overcome the mistakes that we have realized before and to introduce new policies. I respect a lot the money from the taxpayers of other countries that the donor community is giving to our countries less developed than others. And that's why I strongly believed, and I wanted to be sure that the donor activities are focused exactly on the needs that we have. Until that moment, we were focusing that some donor activities were based instead of effective-based policies. So we have witnessed projects or activities, money was spent, project accomplished, but with zero effect, because afterwards everybody are forgetting that the project even existed. So I'm trying to avoid projects that will not have a serious impact. We are focused a lot from the day one. I said we are going to be focused on long-term, sustainable and accountable solution. That is the only way how you can show the respect of the money donors that are providing to us, and at the same time that will be in an effective way with the impact in the society. That's why I have started with a monthly coordination of donors in cybersecurity field, and with institutions at the same time who are actually implementing those activities, so everybody would be aware who is doing what and avoid overlapping. And we have started even before someone is starting a project to make them aware what is covered by other donors, and institutions are already working on that, and what we need to be covered in the rest. I think that kind of coordination is a necessity. On the other hand, we didn't have a systematic approach. Every institution was doing, they are going to find out about some donor activities, apply for the project, get it, and then nobody knows that that was happened. That's why we have established National Council of a Digital Transformation of Society. I have initiated it, government accepted it, I'm chairing it. And in the National Council of Digital Transformation of Society, we are having all stakeholders that are responsible in it, because it is not a political process. It is not the process of one minister, deputy prime minister, one government. It is a society, the responsibility of the society. So we have a Macedonian Banking Association, Agency for Electronic Communication, all Chamber of Commerce, universities. I hope that I'm not forgetting someone, but also very important, I have found a way how to include and preserve opposition to be representing by through the chairperson of persons of the parliamentary committees who are regularly from the opposition, because that is the only way to have an inclusive process, because it is a long-term process. It doesn't last only in one term of one mandate of the government, but the process that needs to have continuity. And at the same time, because the basis is about sharing knowledge and experiences, in building capacities, first human capacity, and then on a technical level. I immediately sent an application when I realized about GFC. I immediately sent an application, and I was very happy when we have been accepted and became 103rd country that is member of GFC. And I invited representatives of GFC to come immediately in our country and organize a meeting with all institutions and make them aware about the opportunities that GFC is providing. And when the Wouter asked me in which groups we would like to apply, I started, okay, first one, policies, yes, we're gonna need that. Unfortunately, I realized that we need help and we definitely need to be part of all groups and provide the opportunity for all stakeholders to network in the whole groups with others. We have already interests in some projects that I provided from our side, and I'm sure that that is one way to be accomplished. Why the systematic approach is important? On the National Council on Digital Transformation of Society, we have prepared, with the help of US Embassy, the concept on digital transformation society based on 5 pillars. And then we have discussed about that on the National Council, and then the same document was adopted by the government. So everybody in the country, all the ministries are aware that all the documents, policies, national strategies should be aligned with this concept. Cybersecurity is also, of course, part of it. That's how we are preserving not to have different strategies on, for example, cybersecurity or ICT or whatever. As the ministries are changing in the ministry, to have different policies or different strategies. The frame is done, the basis is done. If we don't have a solid basis upon which we will build the programs and the policies, then the success is impossible.
Thank you so much for that. I'm a member of the GFCE Advisory Board, and for me it is fantastic to hear about the value that you have found in the working groups and their thematic organizations. There's so much to unpack in your answer, so I look forward to continued discussion. Ms. Magali Anderson, if I might turn to you. You're the Director of Management Information Systems at the African Union Commission. The African Union obviously has member states that are such an incredibly diverse group. Small states like Mauritius, large states like Nigeria, states that have more cyber advancements and some that have fewer. So it's really fantastic to have you on this panel to talk about addressing asymmetries. Could you tell us a little bit about how the African Union thinks about addressing asymmetries? Many of your member states have received substantial cybersecurity capacity building assistance from donors across the globe, while others have not as much due to a variety of factors. How does the AU Commission support its member states so that none of them is left behind?
Thank you. Again, thank you for organizing this side event. It's definitely necessary to be talking about those things. To answer your questions, I think they are manifold. The first part, I would say, as an intergovernmental organization, our role is to facilitate cooperation between our member states. So one of the first things that the AU has been doing and is doing is making sure there is collaboration at all levels. So on the cyber capacity building side, one of the solutions is to enable the countries that have received cybersecurity, cyber capacity building assistance to provide the best practices to the other countries. We have specialized technical committees. We actually finished one in the realm of digital data protection, where all the member states meet to exchange and have a state of affairs. So these kinds of frameworks are in place to enable exchanges between the different countries. We also have different organs that are playing this role. I want to mention, for instance, AFRIPOL, who's working with a lot of the member states to build up the cybersecurity of the police forces in those member states. So we have those existing frameworks. There is still a lot that can be done, though. And like you mentioned, there is a variety of factors making some countries more advanced or receiving more able to receive assistance than others. So those variety of factors are to be taken into consideration. The African Union is just the enabler. The member states are sovereign, so they have their own ways of addressing cyber or prioritizing this, the cybersecurity. We are just engaging with them to make sure that they understand the importance and the critical nature of building capacity in cyber, because nowadays we don't have the choice to be able to be cyber resilient, especially as developing, all of our member states are developing countries. I wanted to mention that, for instance, one of the things that we have been pushing is the adoption of the Malabo Convention for all African countries, all the member states, so that we can at least have a basis to discuss, to have exchanges, so we are all aligned on things that we all agree on. Another key point that I think we are pushing also to our member states, and we are, I want to say, building them to understand the necessity of, is participating in global forum like GFCE and all of those platforms that exist, because having a seat at a table ensures that the decisions, the policies that are taken, take into consideration our local realities, our disparities with the more advanced countries. There is also a need for cooperation between developing countries and more developed and advanced countries. We talk a lot about global support and global cyber capacity building. This is something that the AU is also encouraging, but again, it has to be tailored to each country and each regional community. And I wanted to also mention, for instance, there is the regional communities that are also pushing for the countries, because they are smaller, they have the advantage of being close by as far as geographically speaking. So those regional communities can also be engaged to do more in helping building cyber capacity and resilience. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I had the pleasure of working with a number of regional economic communities, and they really have played an important role in the advancement of cyber capacity building here on the continent. So that's a wonderful, wonderful note. Kaya, could I turn to you? You're the Senior Director of Digital Diplomacy for Microsoft. Can you tell us a little bit sort of about what the private sector can do to help address these asymmetries, and how you can play a role in leaving no country behind?
Thank you. I'm sorry, I need to steal your mic. Thank you. I think it's one of the things where I looked at the question, and I think looked at the different, listening to the different examples from Ukraine to AU to Macedonia. I think and tried to think about the different roles Microsoft plays in all of those areas. And so it's always, it's difficult to, probably from the outside, to also understand how private sector makes decisions on some of these issues. And obviously different companies have different guidelines. I think the corporate cultures sort of shape differently. I think ours is very strongly embedded in sort of the guiding motif is empower every person, every organization on the planet to achieve more. And I think that guides, that guides a lot of our behavior. I think from our perspective, it very strongly, share what's good for the shareholders is good for what's good for the society is good for the shareholders versus the other way around. And I think there's been I feel lucky to an extent to have been able to navigate in some of these things. I think there's several things we could do across the board. I think but all of them need to be embedded in partnership with the local communities, whether it's with governments, whether it's international organizations, or whether it's members of the civil society. I think a lot of the times there's almost a need for a translation, between what the needs are on the ground, but also what the capabilities are. I think just looking at me and understand, and I work in the cybersecurity department in the company, but even for me, the technology develops so quickly, so fast, and the opportunities to both implement secure technologies, use new innovative ways to strengthen what you already have, it's almost impossible to keep up, even if you're in the company. I think being able to actually share this outside and sort of adapt it to the local environments, I think it's even harder. So I think that's why the partnerships are critical. And they could range anything from investing in infrastructure, both from submarine cables. I think a lot of the private sector companies, ours and others, have been investing in those over the past few years, connecting continents, to investing in data centers, to investing in, and we've been doing this over the past couple of years on the African continent. We've been partnering with Viasat, another private sector company, to further our Airband initiative, which is an initiative that looks at advancing internet connectivity, which is kind of essential for cybersecurity. I know it's then the second bit, of course, is skills and development. I think through the jobs and skills for job program that we have here, there's part of it that's been over the past 2 years, again, really focused on cybersecurity, also really focused on cybersecurity on traditionally disadvantaged groups, whether it's women, whether it's people with disabilities, and focusing with intent on empowering those groups and giving them an opportunity to get training, get certificates on cybersecurity, and then use those skills to get jobs, but also to help transform the economy. Another aspect is, and I think, again, something that's also in the self-interest of the companies, investing in the jobs in the economy, investing in the small businesses in the continent, whether it's finding ways to provide them services at a discounted rate, whether it's trainings, whether it's also just mentoring. I think a lot of the times are all areas that I think the private sector can have a massive difference. And I think then another thing that we do a fair amount is, which is not necessarily, I think, like a private sector specific thing, but because we operate across so many countries, we often see different trends, whether it's like from a threat landscape, whether it's from policy environment, and so we're able to maybe connect dots that others are not. So I think also just sharing information about what's going on elsewhere and what we're seeing, what works, what isn't, is another aspect, perhaps.
Thank you so much. I think that we've heard a little bit from folks about how governments can center their own needs. I'd love to hear now a little bit from Australia and Germany about sort of your government's perspectives on how the international community can work better to avoid geographic investment gaps and asymmetries in strengthening cyber resilience globally. We're seeing the field mature quite a bit. So maybe I'll turn to you, Ambassador Dowling. Can you talk us through a little bit how Australia's perspective is on this issue, and your approach to improving coordination and to seeking to avoid investment gaps? I know you all come from a Pacific perspective, which I think is really helpful for those of us sitting here on the African continent to hear a little bit about a comparative example of how that investment gap has been addressed.
Is that better? There we go. I think that's really a critical question and something that we don't seriously enough consider as donor countries. Most of Australia's capacity building work is focused on the Pacific or on Southeast Asia. And the first consideration is that those are very diverse and varied regions. So to take Southeast Asia as an example, you have Singapore, which is highly developed, highly digitised, highly capable in a cybersecurity sense. And then you have a country like Laos, which is still on its journey of digital development, is still figuring out its digital infrastructure, and is really interested in ensuring it builds up that capability. You look at the Pacific, you've got Fiji, a very large country. You have the Federated States of Micronesia, which are geographically spread, much smaller infrastructure. So it's a really varied couple of regions that we work primarily with. And I think for a donor country, the first thing is to consider not what we like to do or what fits within our policy parameters, but actually figure out what's workable for the country that we're working with. And I think too often governments like ours in the past have said, okay, well, we have money available this financial year, we will do a needs assessment, then we'll offer a training program. And we just roll out the same thing to every different location without thinking about what their perspectives and needs are, without talking about what their interests are, how it fits within their policy development cycle, fits with their capability. And so the first thing I think is it's critical to be varied and have the flexibility for the different needs of the countries that you're working with. It's crucial to listen to where they're at in their journey and figure out what works for them. And then to ensure that what we're delivering is not based on what we want to deliver, but what actually meets the needs that they're articulating. And it sort of sounds conceptually easy, but in practice, that's just not how donor countries generally operate. So I think the first thing is resetting the way that we approach that. The second point about duplication is really critical. We recently had a really powerful discussion in the Pacific at the Pacific Cyber Coordination Conference in Fiji in October. And the perspective shared from a lot of Pacific countries then was that you're asking us, your general approach of offering us training and expecting us to be available, expecting the same small team of people to go to this training course or that training course is just not workable. Every second country turning up and saying, you know, we're here to help, we'd like to do a needs assessment, is just duplicating the work that we've done, that other countries have done. So for us, we need to reset that approach as well. We need to coordinate more effectively. We need to back each other's efforts in as donor countries rather than duplicating each other's efforts. And so that's incumbent on us to do more effective coordination. But that does have to be with the needs, interests, expectations of the countries we're working with being a crucial part of that. The final point I make is that we often go to our sort of traditional approach of training, awareness raising. That's really important and we should continue to do that work. But increasingly we're seeing for countries in our region that unless you address some of the foundational vulnerabilities, all the training and awareness raising in the world is not going to necessarily shift the needle. What that means is saying if you are using servers that are not able to be patched because they're so outdated, simply raising your awareness of the need to patch your servers is really not going to do anything. We're actually going to need to help with improving the access to good, secure technology and being far more practical in the support that we deliver. Now, important in that is working with the private sector because, unfortunately, a lot of countries face a choice between affordable technology and secure technology, and bridging that gap and ensuring that countries we're working with have access to world-class, best-in-class technology is crucial because too often there is a compromise being made and all the sort of training in the world is not going to help the fact that you're using poor quality software, poor quality hardware. So that then becomes not just a donor country coordination conference, it becomes an issue of coordinating with the private sector as well and industry partners to ensure that tech is available.
Thank you so much. That's super helpful. Ambassador Kuenberger, you have experience both as a donor country and as a member of a group of donor countries in the European Union. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience in the European Union in coordination and avoiding duplication with your partners?
Yeah, thank you. First, I wanted to echo some of Brandon's points, because actually a donor darling for Australia might also be a darling for us. And if we want to save the time and money for needs assessment, the only way to do this effectively is to think, okay, what worked for them would probably also work for us. And that's how the same partners then get the same offers all the time. So I would say needs assessments might be nasty, but perhaps it's the only way to discover the gaps actually in donors' activities. When it comes to the principles for our cyber capacity building, it has been quite fragmented in the past, and we took a really huge step forward when we worked on a European cybersecurity strategy, where cyber capacity building is one of the basic elements. So for us at the moment, of course, the major part of our money goes to our physical neighborhood. And that is because this specificity perhaps of Europe, but I think other regions might share this experience. We have a lot of people, goods and services moving across borders in digitized societies and economies, and this means that the cyber risks are moving with these. With this traffic also across borders, and making our neighborhood more cyber secure means also making ourselves more cyber secure. And in addition to that, we share, of course, also infrastructure like energy grids and transport and you name it. So that's why we have to focus on our neighborhood. And neighborhood is interpreted in European understanding at the moment, and this is perhaps a fallout of the war in Ukraine, as Ukraine, then Caucasus countries, Moldova, also the Western Balkans, because they are in a process of accession to the European Union. So the moment we join our markets, we have also to be on the same foot with regard to cybersecurity standards. And the second element, much smaller in the moment but developing, is our cyber neighborhood. And those are all those countries which are also identifying with and implementing the cyber norms, the 11 cyber norms that we agreed on in New York in 2021 last time. And this leads us to one specific activity that I would like to mention here, and that is cyber diplomacy capacity building. So incentivizing our partners, for example, in foreign ministries, to think about establishing cyber diplomacy in their portfolios, in their organigrams, because we think that having, trained, educated cyber diplomat might help to make better contributions and better own the cyber norms that we are negotiating at a global level. And another example is the international cooperation in combating cybercrime. So we are active in the Counter-Ransomware Initiative, for example, which is also a good example where you can just illustrate that this problem of cybercrime cannot be solved on a national basis. You have to cooperate internationally, and in order to be able to cooperate internationally, you have to strengthen your cyber capabilities and the network, the people who are actually doing this job. So, this is how we organize ourselves around our physical neighborhood and around our cyber neighborhood. Thank you.
So one of the goals of this panel is to talk about how we avoid duplication and avoid gaps. And one of the examples of that, right, is the case where a donor comes in and wants to do an assessment, and the country says, we had an assessment a year ago. I don't think it's changed that much in the last year. But sometimes countries don't want to share assessments, or the donor who's just come in hasn't received information from others. And that comes, I think, to one piece of the coordination and deconfliction process, which is building trust. Building trust between recipient countries and donor countries, building trust between multiple recipient countries that may want to avoid duplication and at the same time make sure that they can get their share of the assistance. I wonder if anyone on the panel would like to talk a little bit about how you build trust between countries that might be receiving cyber assistance and countries that might be providing cyber assistance. I know, for example, Ms. Krukowska, that you spoke a little bit about donor coordination meetings that you convene. That is really, I think, an excellent example of a way to build trust. Would you like to tell us a little bit about sort of how you set that up and what you've seen come out of that?
I have been aware even before I step up on this position that there is no, it's pretty much chaotic in project funded by the donors without any, I would say, without having system. Mainly relying on what donors think that country needs, which is a very wrong approach. It has to be a partnership pathway. It has to. That's why I'm saying it has to have a systematic approach from the governments, from the national institutions, to make them aware where they are, what are the priorities, and what is emergency needed. And how that can overlap with the opportunities of donors to fund these projects. That's why I started with monthly coordinative meetings with donors that were currently already having cybersecurity investments, and that was. And then I went to Estonia on a conference, digital conference, and I realized that there is EU project run by Estonians about Western Balkans, providing an assessment on Western Balkan resilience, and with the plans on activities, and that some of them has already overlapped with the activities that we already had with USAID and other donors. And I said, okay, stop. Before you continue with this, you must join us on the monthly meeting so you can be aware what we are already doing. Because if you're already allocating money, if EU already allocate money, then let's cover the part which is not covered with already existing projects. And that's how it started. And I have organized also donor conference to make aware all the ambassadors who are of the country who are actually investing money in our country, to make them aware what's going on, to provide them a list what are the needs and how they can find a way to support in this regard. So the ambassadors are already aware, and whenever is some donor that would like to invest in cybersecurity part or digital transformation, he is contacting us, and actually we have increased the number of participants. DCAF has joined us, Swiss embassy, Dutch embassy, and so on and so on. So it is very, very appropriate, and actually everybody are happy. I heard the feedback from the donors, but also from the institutions. Of course, you will find some of them not very happy, I mean locally based, because it disturbed their commodity. Before that, as I said, it is just important for some of the locals, it's just important to provide the project. No one is taking care if the project have impact or not by the institutions. And everybody are happy, but effects for the society are zero. In such way, we are avoiding that. And we have actually provided, in this regard, a lot of trainings for the high official first, then for administration, for the communicators in the ministries, about cybersecurity resilience, to make them aware what does it mean and how we should communicate when cyber attack will happen, because We are a NATO member country. And when the war started on Russia towards Ukraine, I'm always using the opportunity to make everybody aware that we are all at war on the cyber level. Nevertheless, not in a traditional way like towards Ukraine, but on a cyber level, we are all at war. We are facing the same challenges, so we have to find a way to address it and to respond it on the same way.
Yeah, I would like to add on this again, because it's a good example where donor coordination actually works in cyber capacity building. And I think it works because all the donors are aligned around a central objective and a joint objective, and that is strengthening Ukrainian cyber resilience against the attacks that they have. And I think this kind of sharing the same objective is very important for effective donor coordination. And the other one is something that Slavica also mentioned, and that is it works if it is demand-driven. So if we know and we are informed about what recipients actually need, so that in this way we can match it with what we have, and also look for value added in establishing this two-way street that cyber capacity building should be.
Thank you. No, maybe just to build on that as well, because, as you're talking about Ukraine, I feel, nothing builds trust more than a crisis, like a lot of times. So I think Ukraine is both a great example of donors coming together, but also a good forcing function, I think, and I know that's a crisis, and it's, we shouldn't model all of our efforts around all hands on deck all the time, because it's not sustainable. But I think a great learning experience for all of us to learn, I think, because you're right, I think we all share, private sector, public sector, shared an objective and reacted, and there was a demand that we responded to, but we still don't really have good mechanisms for not the public-public, but the public-private cooperation, both in such situations and sort of elsewhere. So I think finding models on and thinking about it, because I think it's basically greenfield in a lot of ways. But what does public-private cooperation mean in those contexts? What does the private sector both has to contribute to the table? What does it want? What does it need? And then on the opposite side, all the same questions for the public sector. I think that's a conversation that needs to start happening with a lot more intent. And I think Ukraine has started that conversation, but we're not there yet.
Absolutely. We only have a very few minutes left, but I did want to open to audience questions. With the caveat that I would plead that if you have a question, make it very brief and make it a question for our panel. So I think we have one up here, please.
Thank you very much for this discussion. So we talk about politics of cyber capacity building, then especially for the international cooperations. So which one is the dominant logic of seeing the international cooperation? Is it from the humanitarian assistance perspective, or is it from the collective security perspective? Which one is the dominant logic for cooperation? Thank you.
I think if I understand your question, it is we're looking at it from an economic perspective and from a political perspective. Is that right? And which of those is sort of predominant? Would anyone like to take that question?
Well, as I said, we come from a security perspective. We go to a development perspective. At the moment, we put more money in security-related cyber capacity building, but we do more conceptual work on development-related capacity building. So that we are, it's changing at the moment. And I wouldn't call the one economic and the other political, because both are political and both are economic, actually.
I agree that it is both at the same time, because it became a security issue, and at the same time it is a basis for economic growth. Because technology is developing so fast, we have to adapt our society or find a way how to make our society more adaptable to the changes that the fast technology is growing is bringing. We are not that successful at the moment, if I may say my opinion, because the system, the administration especially, is very slow on changes. It's very difficult to disturb the commodity and the comfort zone that they have. But on the other hand, we don't have any other way to avoid that, but must adopt very quickly and very fast on the challenges that the technology brings to us.
I'd just add one point. As we see cyber incidents happen, take a ransomware incident that disrupts critical infrastructure or disrupts government services, we're increasingly seeing that as the equivalent of a humanitarian sort of disaster. So in the same way that we see a cyclone affect a country in the region and that requires a all-hands-on-deck approach to assistance, applying assistance when a cyber incident happens, I think we take the same mentality now to say it's no different as a natural disaster. We're seeing a human effect, we're seeing an effect to service delivery, to access to basic functions, and we need to respond in the same way that we do when there's a natural disaster, which means speed, it means putting all efforts, bringing in a range of partners to do it, and increasingly I think that's how we need to respond to cyber incidents.
I think we have time for just one more question, as long as that question can be brief. Would anyone else? Let me have one over here.
Many thanks. My name is Adil Abdel Sadiq. I am from Egypt. Many thanks for this great information. My question is, in recent years, we are witnessed the rise of use cyber sanctions in international relations. How it is impacts on international free trade, impacts on internet neutrality, impacts on cyber resilience. My next question is how to measure the policy gap of capacity building program and how to cope up with the raising of the new skills and the new jobs in the light of the rise of AI. Thank you.
I don't think we quite understood the question. I apologize. Could we have the microphone back, please? I think the first half had to do with cyber sanctions. Is that correct?
Yes. The first question is, how do you see the impacts of the rise of cyber sanctions on cyber resilience? Okay.
The effects of cyber sanctions on cyber resilience. Is that correct? Okay.
The next question is how to measure the policy gap in capacity building program and how to cope up with the rise of AI and the new skills.
So that second question is about the risk of emerging technologies, including AI, and its impact on cybersecurity. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone like to respond?
I'll take the first one. I think for me, cyber sanctions are a tool where cybercrime at the moment is largely unpunished. So if you're a cyber criminal operating from a jurisdiction where you are tacitly allowed to operate, to perpetrate cybercrime on a global level, at the moment you're operating with impunity. I would personally love to see a law enforcement response where if someone is committing a crime, targeting a vulnerable population, targeting a school or a hospital in a ransomware attack, then there should be a law enforcement response. Unfortunately, in a lot of jurisdictions, we're not seeing that response. So sanctions are our next best measure. They're also only a partial response. Sometimes they don't have the deterrent effect that we want, but they are one measure to impose some punitive response to say we do not accept this criminal activity being conducted. We are seeing cybercrime increasing in our region. We're seeing it target Australia, New Zealand, Pacific Island nations. It's long-range criminal activity, and sanctions are one deterrent activity that we can take, but unfortunately not always super effective. So we're going to continue to need to hold the nations accountable where cyber criminals are operating from to try and get some more effective response to stop that activity.
And does anyone want to address the second question?
I wanted to talk about a little bit about the second question. Of course, the emergence of new technology has a big impact on cybersecurity and cyber resilience, in the sense that countries that are already behind in cyber capacity will be even more affected with those new technologies. So it definitely is something that needs to be talked about or thought about collectively to see what needs to be done to prevent those different technologies from increasing the gap between those countries and leaving some of those countries behind.
Yeah, and I would agree with that probably. I think technology evolves constantly. I think today we're talking about AI. Maybe 5 years ago, in very similar terms, we're talking about cloud computing. And I think we adapt, right? Slowly. I think there's an up ramp a lot of the times. I would also say it's true to what you said. I think the countries that are behind already are probably a little bit more vulnerable. There's also an opportunity to perhaps jump ahead, right? And actually look at the new technologies. I think on AI specifically, I think collectively we are all trying to understand how to navigate this space, how to ensure that as the technology is developed and used, is done so responsibly and with security in mind. What we are seeing on the sort of the criminal side at the moment, although we fully expect criminals to be like, AI is going to be great really soon. I think we've not seen very many AI-based attacks. There's a few that were in the media here and there where there's like deep fakes. I think predominantly around influence on operation, disinformation. I think it's where the AI is being used a little bit more. We've seen an increase in sophistication of how phishing is conducted, because AI often can empower better targeting, better language capabilities as well to make the emails easier sell, but not on a massive scale now. I think we are now at the stage where, I said like 5 years ago, we were like cloud. This last year, we've seen criminals for the first time really very intentionally, I guess, start using cloud services to scale. To increase the number of attacks using the power of cloud. But, at the same time, as criminals advance, so does security, so does technology. And in reality, some of these technologies need so much computing power that hopefully, fingers crossed, this means that the defenses, because the computing power is with the big companies, the defenses will be prioritized and it will be a little bit easier, at least in the long term, to defend against the criminal actors than otherwise.
Well, I want to thank our panel so much for your excellent comments. Thank you to the government of Germany for coordinating, and obviously to the GFCE and the GC3B organizers for this work. Thank you for joining us, for your good questions, and for your engagement. And I will look forward to seeing you around for the rest of the day. Thank you very much.